Hey guys, and welcome to All Around Hockey, the YouTube channel for the all around hockey fans. So today we're going to start something pretty cool. Since the off season's kind of starting to die down a little bit, I thought maybe we could start looking at the 32 teams and their season previews, and maybe what else they should do for the remainder of this off season. And so we're going to use our trusty friend Puckpedia here to look over these things, and also we could use Hockey Reference to go over all the stats that they had last season. But we're going to go start off with the team that's garnered the most interest this offseason, that being the Anaheim Ducks. As you can see from their team wise here, they have Leo Carlson now locked up at $18 million per season for the next 5 seasons. Chris Kreider, Alex Killorn, Beckett Seneke still there, Frank Petrano still there as of now. And then, you kind of go down, you scroll down. Troy Terry is going to be out for the first part of the season, so that's going to be a really big blow for them. And you kind of look over at the restricted free agents, and the big name there that everybody's talking about is Cutter Gauthier. What is he going to cost, and how are the Ducks kind of going to be able to facilitate bringing him back at probably a pretty high cap hit? So the big rumor right now is Cutter Gauthier could be requiring up to $15 million in a contract. You kind of look at Cutter's stats here from last season. Here on the top line, he had 76 games played, 41 goals, 28 assists for 69 points per season. That is according to Hockey Reference here. And so we kind of go back to now. And, there was a $15 million contract offer for Jason Robertson recently. Jason's been a little bit more consistent there for them. So maybe they could bring him in a little bit less. I think the aim was to probably get him around 10 to $12 million. I don't think that's maybe attainable anymore. Maybe they could bring him back at like just spitballing an idea here at like about 1350 or 1300 500 sorry 13 million, 13.5 basically is what I mean to say, or maybe around 6 year contract. Maybe they could get that locked up. Obviously, as you can see, that makes a pretty big dent in the cap space right off the bat. So that's probably the first order of business that the Ducks probably are going to need to get done. We could get Sasa Passage off, maybe brought back at 950K. He's somebody who could maybe end up playing this season. And then Lashlop, Bucciet's, maybe I don't know, 875 or something. Nothing, crazy for those guys. Those guys are mostly just minor league contracts right now. But here's the issue. With the cap space the way it is, as you can see, even if they could convince Cutter to take 13.5 on a contract, that's still about $6 million less in cap space that they need. So the big rumors right now of people possibly being moved are Alex Killorn, Frank Vetrano, and Chris Kreider. As you can see from Kreider, as we go to his page here, he had a pretty successful season last year. He had 50 points in 75 games played. I would think that was the one guy that Anaheim probably doesn't want to move right now, would be Chris Kreider. Um, some teams interested in Killorn are the New York Islanders and Edmonton Oilers. Could there be a trade facilitated there? Frank Vetrano, the big team linked to him right now is the Vancouver Canucks. Could a trade be done there to kind of facilitate this? Pat Verbeek's got a lot that he has to do right now. So you kind of look at the draft capital that Anaheim's got right now. They got 3 second-round picks, which is good. They might need to use one of those picks in order to trade one of those contracts off their hands. But they don't have a third and a fourth. Maybe you could acquire one of those and a Petrano trade. So kind of looking here a little bit at the needs that Anaheim kind of needs right now. Cutter Gauthier, if you're lucky enough to get him at 13.5, like we would have in this situation, that would basically negate the entire cap space at that point. So Killorn and Vatrano are definitely guys who might need to be moved. I think they would like to keep Chris Kreider. He was very productive for them. You know, Killorn, he had not as a productive season, obviously, as you can see, 33 points in 82 games. Consistent player, always on the ice there, but not necessarily somebody who could fill in for Chris Kreider in those needs. And then obviously, as you can see, Frank Vatrano had 9 points in 50 games played last season. So not the best production there, but maybe you could get something for him still. So a couple of the trades, like we said, teams interested. Edmonton's interested in Killorn. But I thought of a pretty interesting trade, or one that's kind of been maybe a little bit rumored out there, is for a decent player. Could be like an Anthony Duclair coming back. As you can see, he makes 2 years, $3.5 million. You can check out his stats from last season. All this through Puckpedia. Amazing place to use if you want to kind of see what your team can do next. He had 27 points, 62 games. Wasn't on the ice as much as Killorn, but Killorn had 33 points in 82 games, and Duclair had 62 points or 27 points in 62 games. Excuse me. So that might not be a bad replacement. However, you might need to include a sweetener in this type of trade. So if you trade Killorn's contract, you might have to include one of the sweeteners. Could it be one of these second round picks? Could you maybe convince them to take a third round pick in next year's draft off your hands instead of a second round pick? It might hurt. So I don't know, maybe we can include the Ducks' second round pick in this trade and make this trade happen here for both teams. I don't know. Let me know if you guys think that'd be a good trade, Duck fans, Islander fans. If you think that'd be a good trade for your team to pick up an Alex Killorn. Like I said, more consistency on the ice, and they're pretty similar player types, player archetypes. Maybe Alex Killorn's a little bit bigger, but definitely you lose some production there, or some minutes maybe, but it's kind of what the Ducks have to do now. They're in a really, really tough spot. Matching that Leo Carlsson contract, it just kind of takes away so much away from them. Now, another trade we could go after here, the big team linked is the Vancouver Canucks for Frank Vatrano. Could there be a trade there? Ooh, not Leo Carlsson. They just matched that, so that's not happening. So maybe you can go down here, and there is Frank Vatrano right there. So 2 years, 4.571 left on that contract. And so here, I don't know if there's a player that is interesting in terms of a trade. I would probably lean more towards you got a player back. Maybe if you could facilitate a Duclair for Killorn trade, maybe you could just take maybe draft capital back. You're missing a fourth round pick in this upcoming draft. Vancouver's got 2 of them. Maybe if you pick one of those 2 picks up, you're probably going to take the lesser one at the end of the day because you're the one in the cap situation. So they want to maybe take advantage of that. And they also have 2 fifth round picks. So I think maybe Vancouver would be willing to trade a fourth round pick to bring in Frank Vatrano, just to kind of facilitate that trade, get that done, gets that cap hit off the books, and there that goes. You just cleared, over $10 million in cap space. That gets you $1 million in cap space, which still is not a lot, but it might be what you have to do. And you still got a pretty decent player back here. If you brought in an Anthony Duclair, you could put him there on the third unit, right? Basically where Killorn would be his replacement. You could ride with the top unit of Gauthier, Carlsson, and go with that. Mikael Granlund could send your second unit, and maybe you could go like an AJ Greer here. Now, a big name that could make a difference here this season um, for the Ducks could end up being their first round pick from last year. He was a top 10 pick, Roger McQueen. That's somebody who, obviously, you look at his size. He's 19 years old. I think that size will play in the National Hockey League. He had a pretty decent year at Providence last year with 27 points in 36 games. It's a pretty good year for him. He was the 10th overall pick in 2025. Signed him to his entry level contract. You probably are giving him a good shot because guys like Roger McQueen might be the difference here. Now, the Ducks got a lot of scoring depth from a lot of the veterans they brought in the years prior with Kreider and Killorn, and some from Vetrano, and then they brought in Ryan Poehling. This year they brought in AJ Greer when they traded Rocco Gudis, which we'll go over the defense in a little bit here. Sasha Pasajov, he had a really good year in the AHL last season. He's somebody who's kind of developed a little bit nicely for them as a third round pick. He had 57 points, 36 assists, 21 goals, 71 games. Could he be somebody you take a flyer on, see how he does in the NHL for a little bit, especially with Troy Terry out there? Troy's going to be out at least for October. So you could maybe give Sasha Pasajov a chance or a shot, see how he does. So we're going to move Roger McQueen up here into the starting lineup here. We say he makes the team. That was just interesting. I did that. Sorry. He's saying we got negative. All right, he's got. All right, so yeah, we're just a little bit over in cap space, but about 5,000. We can obviously make that difference up later on here. But maybe you could go with Roger McQueen centering that third unit. You could run with Greer there, and or you could go Roger over there on the wing with Poehling and Duclair. That might not be a bad third unit. You could Passage off some minutes down the fourth line along with Malott and Gachar there. Gauthier that could be pretty decent. And so those are some maybe possibilities there that they could do. Tristan Leno probably is going to be up, so you send him down. He did Franco, you might probably send him down too as well. Just clear up some of that cap space again. So basically now at this point, you're under the cap floor, but not by much. You're basically almost at the cap floor. So a thing that they are interested in is bringing in a top four defenseman or a nice solid 5-on-5 defenseman. I don't know what options you may have. Nick Jensen, he's a good option as like a 6. I don't think he's really a 4. Ian Moore, same thing. Tyson Hines is probably just coming in now to go and start things here. So what you could do, as you can see, if you send some of those people down, you get to about $2 million, $2.5 million in cap space. Maybe you could use that remaining cap space to bring in not a star defender, but somebody who might be a pretty decent option and somebody I've kind of looked at as maybe being an option. He was pretty decent where he played with Nashville and Colorado last season. He had 8 goals, 16 assists, 24 points. It's Nick Blankenburg. He had some pretty solid offensive production for a couple of years in at Michigan before he went pro. But maybe you could bring him in on a 1 or 2 or 3 year contract at like 2.2. You lost a lot of good production from. I don't think Blankenburg's somebody who's going to require too much in caps of a cap hit. So I think that's maybe something you could get done, and you're basically at the cap floor at that point. maybe you have to move another player to facilitate that. Maybe you don't even look at a Nick Blankenberg, but I just thought maybe that might be a decent guy to put in the top four there. With Mintyukov, being the big solid defensive defenseman, you could allow Nick Blankenberg to kind of take over a little bit more of his offensive side of games, and maybe let him even run one of the power play units. You got Laurent Brossoit. Maybe you could trade Billy Husso. Do you need to run 3 goaltenders? That could be a way you could clear up some cap space potentially. You have some pretty decent prospects down here who could maybe act as that third goaltender. So, that could possibly be a way that Ducks could clear up a little bit more cap space. This is a pretty interesting team. At the end of the day, I feel like, right now you probably run Greer on the top 6, or you could even run McQueen up there on the top 6 and maybe even move Granlund over to be a wing. Or you could run Granlund with switch him and Seneke. That's a pretty solid second unit. I'd probably rather have some veterans around the rookie if I was me, but I'm not a NHL head coach. I think the Islanders trade might be interesting to do. Bringing in Anthony Duclair to help out with losing Killorn, and see what happens there. From that, and if you can maybe get Cutter Gauthier at 13.5, you try and do it. Who knows if that's even possible? I know I might. Yeah, I cleared up $2 million cap space. That $2 million might just go to Cutter Gauthier at the end of the day because he might be asking for $15 million, and Blankenberg may not be an option. But that might be a possibility to run Blankenberg there on a power play unit, along with Kreider, Gauthier, and then when Troy Terry does eventually come back from injury, I think you could facilitate 3 really good lines here, or 4 really solid lines. Maybe Passajoff now goes back down if he didn't perform up to maybe the standards you maybe want, or you could even move him up to the third unit there and have Holding there. Maybe move Washi down, and that could end up being 4 pretty solid lines if you go Cutter, Leo, Seneke, that really talented young first unit. Kreider, McQueen could send to the second unit with Terry. I think that's 2 excellent wingers to pair up with Roger McQueen. Could you bring in Anthony Duclair with Mikael Granlund, Sasha Passajoff? That could be a good solid line, or you could move AJ Greer to be that third line winger there with them. And, I just think that's a pretty solid 4th unit with Poehling and Greer, and, could end up being pretty productive. So let me know what you guys think. I'm going to publish this on Puckpedia and share it, and hope you guys like this video. The next team we're going to go over is going to be the Boston Bruins. Let me know what you guys think about this. Did you like this type of video? Did you not? And, I look forward to seeing how this goes down the line, and really look forward to hearing back from you guys. What moves do you think the Ducks need to make next? Obviously, probably Cutter Gauthier is the main target there. And so how do you think that's going to end up going? So I look forward to hearing from you guys. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to All Around Hockey, the new YouTube channel for the All Around Hockey fan. And I will talk to you guys next time. All right, bye.